Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar here at Simplilearn. I'm your host, Dan Bevener, and we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of paying for social placement with Matt Bailey. And Matt is going to introduce himself in a moment here, but I just wanted to give a little heads up about him. He is the best-selling author and marketing expert. He's a corporate trainer, professional speaker, and he's also the digital marketing instructor for the Direct Marketing Association in New York City, and a member of the digital marketing faculty for Simplilearn. So, hi, Matt. How are you?
Oh, there we go.
Great.
I'm doing well, Dan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. It's good to hear you. So, everyone, I just want to do a little bit of house cleaning before we get started, and that is for those of you that are new to webinars or even new to WebEx, let me give you a little rundown of how to interact with us here. Everyone is actually muted except for Matt and myself. But if you want to ask a question, we encourage that, because throughout this webinar, if there's something that relates to a slide, feel free to ask us a question. There are two ways to do that. One is through the Q&A function, which is located in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. So just click on that, and you can select who you want the question to go to, whether it's Matt or the panelists or the host or everyone in general. And there's also the chat function. So those two functions, we encourage you to just send us a private message with your questions. We'll also be pausing at about 20 minutes in to maybe ask any questions people might have up to that point. You'll stay muted, but we'll read your questions, and Matt will answer them as they come on. And then, of course, at the end, we'll have another following Q&A there. So with that, I'd like to hand this over to Matt, who's going to share with us all of these deep, dark secrets about social placement and why you might want to actually pay for it yourself rather than just go the organic route. Hey, Matt.
Hey, thank you so much for the introduction. I really appreciate that. And yes, we're going to dive into the world of paying for social placement. And of course, as with any type of marketing outlook, when we start to evaluate this, as with anything, I'm going to recommend that you look at anything with a healthy amount of skepticism. We are constantly bombarded, especially in the marketing industry, with the latest fad, the latest news, the darlings of the media. They love different apps, different trends, and so we always need to keep an eye on those things, and we need to understand that not everything is going to work for everybody all of the time. And so I'm going to walk through some of the things that we absolutely need to know from a paid placement standpoint. I'm also going to be presenting the good and bad of what to expect as you dive into it. Now, one of the things that you absolutely have, I'm sure, seen if you've done any marketing activity whatsoever, that the organic reach of your social channels is probably trending down. Main reason is that there is so much information that is just in the funnel to be shown to each individual person. Our news feeds are constantly being bombarded, not just by our friends, our acquaintances, or our connections, but also advertisers that want to reach us. And so there has to be some limits, and things have to be scaled down. And so your organic reach is down significantly from what it was just a few years ago, maybe even a few months ago. One of the big problems when it comes to especially social is the lack of clear metrics or the ability to track what you are doing and what you are getting out of it. So we're going to identify some of that and some ways that you can combat that, but ultimately this is one of the bigger problems for marketers. The third is that I'm amazed at how many people get into social media or use social media as an end unto itself, rather than as a part of an overall strategy to engage with their audiences. And so it comes down to your goal. What are you trying to accomplish? And if everything, all of your marketing budget is focused on engaging in social media, you may want to take a step back and look at what you're doing and what you're expecting from it, and also your bigger goal of what you're trying to do in reaching your audience. Now, I say this because from the first point, we've all seen our organic reach getting smaller. Now, that's mainly because these social companies that are offering these services, they need to monetize somehow. What better way to monetize than to make advertisers pay more to reach more people? And one of the ways they've been able to convince people to do that is by limiting your access to your followers. Now, if you want to reach more people, you're going to have to go the promoted route, because that will then enable you to reach the greatest amount of people possible. Your organic posts are going to be limited. They're going to be throttled back because it's in their best interest for you to pay for placement. Now, the other side of this is dark social, which you are paying to reach people that reach a significant requirement. Now, that requirement could be a cookie. Someone that has visited your site and interacted with your website, they've got a cookie. And so you can target them through social channels, but you have to pay to do that. So really, what's happening with social media? It's becoming a pay-to-play proposition. And so you need to become more aggressive in how you view social marketing, because they're in it for the money and you are the money that they're in it for. And so knowing how to reach people and the best ways to budget for specific messages is going to be critical in the coming years. Now, one of the problems, and this is specifically for Facebook, is that as advertisers have paid to boost posts or create campaigns, sites like Facebook are misreporting numbers. They're overestimating video views. They have different definitions of what is a view when sold to an advertiser as to what they do internally. And so Facebook has had a lot of problems with advertisers. The only thing is, as much as advertisers would say they don't trust Facebook, advertising on Facebook is going up and people are paying more, mainly because that's where the audience is and that's how you can reach them. Really, it comes down to this. Facebook, Snapchat, LinkedIn, you have to look at this as it's somebody else's audience. Really, it's a second party. It's their platform. It's their audience. Even though they follow you, you don't own them. You see, it's the social media. It's Facebook that determines if your organic post is going to reach your audience and how much of it will reach. And so they're the ones that are monetizing their platform. It's their metrics and their audience. You're only renting it. And so because of that, we need to have our goals aligned to what are organic posts going to do for us, what are sponsored posts going to do for us, and what do we want people to do when they see those posts. You see, the whole goal of marketing through social channels is ultimately to bring people to your own properties, because then you can track what they do, what they download, what are they interested in, and how can you engage them, not just on that social platform, but by bringing them back to your site, whether it is for lead generation, lead nurturing, customer care, or customer advocacy. Having that customer journey and what you want to accomplish in front of you at all times will help you then engage better in social channels in order to drive people to those destinations. Now, very important for us to remember is that people don't use social channels the same way. People use different channels for different activities, and there is an old saying that is very true, especially in social media, that says the medium is the message. What that means is that how you receive information, the medium or the media through which you receive that information, will in large part determine how much you read or how much credibility or how much attention you give that information. I created this chart to help us understand how people engage with content based on how they see it. You see, if you're reading an article online, you're going to be, this is where you're the most engaged. Chances are you're researching something, so you're on a page and you are reading about it. Now, think about what's on the page. The context of the information is very high, whereas the competition for your attention is very low. And so because of that, this medium of an editorial format of an article is high on your interest and engagement level. The same with video. Now, there might be a little more competition because we've got some related videos down the side, we've got other things popping up on the video, but the context is still very high. Same thing when you're doing forums or something like that. Now, a little more competition for your attention is creeping into the viewing area, but the context is still relatively high. Now, when we look at social media like Twitter, Snapchat, or Instagram, information is happening very quickly. It's streaming through as it happens. And the problem here is that there's very little context to the information. The context is determined based on who you're following, and who you're following could be for different reasons, and also what they're posting could be for very different reasons. And so you have this constant flow of very disparate information, and it's a high level of competition for your information because there's constant information flowing through there. And so how people engage is in large part dependent upon how the medium or the channel through which they are engaging. That certain channels will grab people's attention more than others. And we can see this because when people come from each of these channels, we can in large part predict how they are going to act when they click on a link from any one of these channels. People that click on a link from Twitter or Snapchat are typically going to be at that page for about 10 seconds or less, and then they're going to leave. People that click on a link from an article will tend to stay longer, do more, and they will convert at a higher rate. Search is somewhere in the middle because you determine the context for your search, and the competition is largely predictable with the other search results on the page. So what's your plan? How are you going to engage your audience? And already, have you measured to see which channels provide the best exposure, the best stickiness for your users as they engage with that? Which medium also provides you the ability to control your brand and your brand message and be effective in getting that message to your audience? And then also, can you reach at scale? Meaning, can you reach as many people as you want to reach? Can you do it organically? Do you have to pay? Do you know how many, do you know your reach based on a paid promotion, based on the sum total of followers or people you're trying to reach? How are you measuring? And does it align to your big picture of what you're trying to do? Let's get into the pros and cons here. That's why you're here. The number one pro-con, and this is probably the con, the costs are low, but they are increasing fast. So what I will say is those that have already started paying for social placement have probably already paid the lowest prices they will ever pay. If you're just getting into it now, it will be somewhat lower, but it is going to constantly increase. That's because the market is growing. People are finding out that this can be effective, and so everyone is jumping on board. And so be prepared that the costs will just continue to climb. Now, number two reason for doing this is you get better exposure. You see, if you're just doing an organic post, it's going to reach a small percentage of your followers. Maybe it will go outside of that, but really that's all you're doing. In order to get more of your followers, you've got to pay. And depending upon how many you want to reach or even beyond followers, maybe you're trying to get more followers, you've got to be willing to spend for that promotion. I have here from 500 to 5,000. It could be double or triple that depending upon what you're trying to do, gain followers, engage with your own audience, or even more. One thing that is making it easier is a lot of the social platforms are adding functions that will enable ways for you to engage with ads without actually leaving that platform. Facebook Canvas, Twitter cards, Instagram is now allowing some built-in calls to action so that people don't have to leave that social platform in order to engage with your ad or engage with the brand. And so there are more and more functions coming online that will enable that, and you're going to get some good metrics off of it as well. Remember that they are their metrics. It's the social platform's metrics because it's their platform. Now, one of the cons to all of this is as you develop campaigns for each one of these sites, you've got to deliver creatives in different ad formats, in different size formats, depending upon what you are attempting to do. As you can see here, the display ads on YouTube are different sizes than Instagram. They're different than Facebook, different than LinkedIn. So your creative's got to be pretty much locked in and flexible in order to go across channels and utilize them, because they all, even though there are, the standard ad formats, it seems like they're all doing their own thing, and we'll find some consistency, but not always across the board. And so for your ad campaigns, you need to be aware that there's going to be different sizes available, and have your creative ready to go, and make sure that you can test that in those formats. Now, here's why I love social placement. It's targeting. It's all about data. You can start to develop campaigns based on specific data points that match the type of people you want to reach. You can do it with demographics, sociographics, even firmographics. Firmographics are the business-to-business side of demographics. So if you want to reach a business with a certain amount of people, a certain amount of revenue, in a certain industry, that's firmographics. Sociographics are more along the lines of if you're looking for people that, maybe retired or just married or just with a baby, a new baby, that would be more sociographics and targeting based on social type of groupings. You can also go for local or regional targeting. You can go based on interests, which Facebook provides. Now, from a programmatic standpoint, which is where I'm doing automated ad buys, I can do retargeting. Again, that's targeting ads based on people who have visited my site, or maybe they responded to another campaign, visited a landing page, but didn't take action. And so I can retarget them through a programmatic buy through social channels. And again, based on their behavior, I may have a high budget because they showed a high affinity towards my brand or towards the offer that was there. You see, I kind of look at the organic reach as test messaging. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson that back in the day, direct mail was the #1 way of reaching an audience. And if I had an audience of 50,000 or even 1 million people, instead of coming up with a creative and then sending it to all of my list of 1 million people, I would only send to about 2%. And I would see what the response rate was based on that 2%. Similarly, when you do an email campaign, a best practice is to send a test to about 2% of your list, measure the response, adjust anything that maybe you've done an A/B test where you sent one message to 2% and another message to another 2%. Measure the response off that and then send the winner to your larger list. This is how we can view organic posting. That ideally, when you do an organic post, it might hit about 5% of your audience. It's not going to go far. But you can look at the performance of that organic post, and if it does well, especially compared to other organic posts, and there is a good response rate, then I look at that as a key to hit that promote button and start building more momentum with that message. Now, one of the things that a lot of people have a problem with is measurement of my campaign. So what I'm showing you here is a Facebook ad, and usually when people are looking and putting things on Facebook and advertising, they're looking for engagement. The thing is, when we start looking at engagement, there are a lot of ways to engage with this ad. And so I want to highlight just a few here because there are a couple ways you can engage with it. You can engage by clicking on the sponsor ad. You can engage with the thumbs up. You can engage by actually, let me see here, where'd my tool go? You can engage by doing a like, a comment, a share, or you could actually click on the creative of the ad. So there's a lot of ways you can engage, but the thing is that not all of these engagements are worth the same amount. You see, if I get a comment or a share, that means that that is something that is going to go into the network feed of anyone who comments or shares. They're going to share it with their network. And so in that way, I'm getting earned media views because they're sharing it with their network. A like is a like, and I really have a hard time comparing likes with, the same degree as comments or shares. And a like is certainly not as good as getting someone to actually click on the creative to do what I want them to do. So I'm going to measure that a little differently, and I could lump everything under this cost per engagement, that I spent $5,000 and I got this many clicks, and those clicks could be anything, and that's a cost per engagement. It's a pretty nebulous measurement, I'm sure you can see here. So let's go to the next slide here, and we'll take a deeper look. And let me see if I can. Okay, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get rid of all this. There we go. Good. Okay, now, what's the goal of my campaign? The goal of my campaign is to get people to click the creative, to learn more. And based on that click, now I have my cost of campaign, and if my cost of the campaign was $5,000, then I count the amount of conversions, the amount of people that clicked the ad, and now I have my cost per click. All right, now those people that clicked the ad then went to my landing page and filled out a lead form. They converted on the lead form. Now I can trace my Facebook ad, and I got to get my marker here because I'm loving this. Everyone who clicked on that ad, and then everyone who went to a landing page. And my landing page then converted them. I had my nice little button here that, and all of their information, they filled it out, and when they filled it out, they became a lead. So now I can take how much I spent on the campaign. Here, $2,500 on the campaign. I got 200 new leads, and now I can measure this campaign to $12.50 cost per lead. And so that's an initial way, if I'm driving people to a destination that I can measure, that's one of mine, then I can start attaching a value to what the campaign generated. Okay, let me clean all this up before I go to the next slide. All right. Now, the next pro and con, and this kind of falls under social placement, but it is advertising placement that tends to show up on social sites. And this is called paid editorials, native advertising, or content syndication. There's a lot of different names for this. Native advertising, mainly for the reason that the ad looks like the content of the site that you are on. And so we see this, it's advertorials, it's companies that, BuzzFeed is a great example of this, where a brand will put content on BuzzFeed under the brand's name, but the content looks like everything else on BuzzFeed. Advertorials, companies that will pay, and we see this also if you've ever seen related articles. That is paid placement of articles that are basically ads. And so one of the things a reasonable consumer has to be able to do is distinguish between what's paid advertising and what is published editorial content. Unfortunately, that line is getting harder and harder to distinguish every day. Main reason is because of something like this. This is a great example of an infographic that went into Wired magazine, and it looks like any other type of article in Wired. But there's something I want you to see here that most people did not see when they were on this site. And right here it says, and I just scribbled over it, advertisement in a very small, hard to see text. And so that is the only thing that tells you that this is paid placement. And so the upside is you can get a lot of eyeballs onto something that looks like an article on a trusted publisher's website. The downside is when people finally see that it's an ad or understand that it's a paid placement, the credibility might take a hit. So be very careful with that and make sure it is clearly marked, because this is something that the government, regardless of where you are, most governments are looking very closely at the type of advertising that looks like publisher material but is actually an ad. Disclosure is becoming a bigger and bigger issue in these areas. Now, I want to start talking about influencers, working with bloggers, video personalities, Instagram personalities. Now, one of the things, and this might be pretty obvious, if it's a macro influencer, that means they have a lot of people following them. If they're a micro influencer, and this is something that's arisen over the past, I don't know, probably a year or so, and that is instead of paying a lot of money to one person who has a large audience, what if we look for micro influencers that have a stronger relationship, a stronger, let's say a more isolated type of message or personality? For example, a micro influencer, they tend to have a blog or an Instagram feed where they focus specifically on fashion, photography, travel, food, decor. They focus on a specific subject area. And so by finding micro influencers with smaller audiences but with a more specific focus, that's where a lot of brands have started to look here, or doing a combination of both. Now, the upside of all this is that working with a macro influencer can increase your reach. So on the left side here, during the last Super Bowl, last February, Audi and Snapchat were working together here, and so Audi was doing a great campaign, basically, who cares about the game, and it was a pretty good campaign. Now, in doing this, they received 5,500 new Snapchat followers on the day of the Super Bowl, more than 100,000 views. Now, they got 2,400 campaign mentions, and that totaled about 37,000 impressions. 2,500 new Twitter followers, 9,000 new Facebook fans. So depending upon what kind of budget, those numbers may impress you, they may not. Another example here is Logan Paul, who is a macro influencer. Sour Patch Kids did a video campaign. It generated 120,000 new Snapchat followers for Sour Patch. 6.8 thousand impressions or million impressions generated. 500,000 of those were on the first day of the campaign. 26,000 screenshots and 1,900 Twitter mentions. Now, that campaign with Logan Paul and the Sour Patch Kids cost over $100,000. So, depending upon who you are, you might be looking at the return on investment. What does $100,000 get you working with a macro influencer? To some brands, this is good. This is acceptable. This moves the needle, and that's what they want. To others, they may say, no, thank you. I'm going to spend my money elsewhere. And that's okay. It depends on who you are, your brand, and what you're attempting to do. Another example of this, this is Megan Ranks. She has 2.3 million subscribers. She works with Old Navy. Old Navy works with both macro and micro influencers. Now, her campaign reached over 1 million of her 2.3 million followers. Basically, she just created a number of videos with Old Navy products, clothing, things like that. See, the downside of working with these macro influencers and maybe some micro influencers is the price. Like I said, the Logan Paul Sour Patch campaign was $100,000. If you're working with a macro influencer, that's the kind of money you should expect to pay. one quote that I found is the average price of $100,000 for an influencer with over 5 million followers, and that is the cost to create one video post for each of the 3 major platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. Now, you may get away. Single tweets can cost anywhere between $50 and $100. A high visibility blogger with a larger audience, it may cost about $100,000 for an article. A single review from a blogger could cost as much as $10,000. And Honda, working with one influencer, paid $10,000 for a 2-minute video. So this is where working with influencers is depending upon who you're working with, the prices are going up. However, you also need to be careful, because this is where things get a little dicey. You see, right now, there's no standard. There is no, there's some going rates, and a lot of the micro influencers want macro influencer prices. A lot of the macro influencers know what other macro influencers are making, and so they're going to demand as much, if not more. And so their price points are everywhere. Now, it starts at the bottom. If you want to pay for social placement, the cheapest and where you can start is just sponsoring a tweet or sponsoring a post. You can just start there, see what the results are, and move from there. Then purchase some social ads. That is advertising on social sites for a specific demographic, geographic. You can add more data points in order to have them focused on your audience. Then you can move into some integrated or programmatic buys. Again, you're using data points to reach a specific audience. Video advertising is highly effective. That requires a lot of resources for many companies. And so to develop the video, to write the video, to edit it, and a lot of times people will say it doesn't have to be high quality. I always kind of raise my eyebrow at that comment, because I don't really see where low quality is doing great. People like high quality stuff, and maybe I should say people like high quality that sometimes looks low quality, but it's high quality. It's been produced, and it's been written well, and it has a specific point, and that's what it's for. Now, next are the paid advertorials, or the native advertising. That's going to cost you some, and that's one where I always put a caution on that yes, it works, but when people find out it's paid ads, the credibility hit off of that is a little bit, but like I said, for some it works. And influencer marketing is at the very top of the paid social pyramid. So this is sort of the hierarchy of what you're looking at when you're budgeting. Now, influencer marketing is brand new. Now, granted, it's a couple years in here, but it is the shiniest thing right now when it comes to social media. And you've got to watch out, because sometimes some brands have realized that they're throwing, tens of thousands of dollars at a 20-year-old who has generated 1 million followers. And that 20-year-old is not the most business savvy. All of a sudden, they're having all this money thrown at them, but they don't work like a brand works. They don't run on the same schedule, nor do they have the same goals. And so you're working with people that they're outside of the typical corporate arena, and they like that. They are independent. They've built this on their own, and they don't want anyone to tell them how to do what they do. So because this is so new, there is a lot of unknown going on about it. A lot of times in speaking with other brands that have done a lot of influencer marketing, one of the most frustrating points is the unfamiliarity with contracts, and in dealing with some of these influencers that really don't understand business. They want the money, but they don't understand commitment to contracts, schedules, and things like that. Also, if you're doing this, you can't forget to track and measure. One example here is the director of marketing from Orchid Island Juice Company is saying, especially on Snapchat, you have no way of knowing what kind of impact it's making for your brand. There's just no measurement that they are able to put in there to know the return. Now, one study says that businesses are getting $6.50 in revenue for each dollar spent on influencer marketing. Another study says that 65% of marketers can't find a return on investment. So which is it? Be very careful where you're getting your information from and who funds the study. That's going to be my first bit of information. But also, if you can, if you're doing any amount of influencer marketing, some of the things that you can do, offer a discount code specifically for that campaign, that blogger, that personality that they can give to their audience. Create an individual landing page for that campaign. Make sure you tag things properly, or even create an individual URL that they can share. That way it will give you an idea what's going on, but making a point A to point B measurement is very difficult, and that's the #1 frustration for marketers in the social space. Now, one of the downsides, a lot of brands have expressed frustration in that when you work, especially with a macro influencer, they want to do things the way they do them. They don't want to always be told what to do for a brand. And so as a brand, if you are paying for an influencer, you have to give up some level of brand control, because you're allowing this influencer to recast your brand in a way that their audience will accept. It just can't come across as a blatant advertisement unless that's their policy and that's how everything's going to roll. No, they want to do it their way. And especially if you're asking an influencer to create a video or create something specifically for you, you're going to have to give up some level of control. And remember, a lot of these people are mavericks, and that's the way that they have built their audience. And so they're going to want to do it their way. Now, this can come back and bite you. Disney has felt this in their relationship with the blogger PewDiePie, or the YouTube personality PewDiePie, one of the top video bloggers around the world with the largest audience, and he started getting in trouble and saying things that were not good. And Disney had to separate themselves from him, and no longer with the contract there. He lost money. Disney was associated with some of the things he was doing. So be very careful about what you're giving up, as well as make sure you've done your research on this influencer, that they are going to reflect well on your brand. So again, you're dealing with personalities, and you're dealing with personalities who are outside of the corporate structure. They have built their audience on their own, and so they don't like to be told what to do. One agency quote here from an unnamed source is that working with influencers is a headache. And they said they're not aware of things that are just very obvious, like sticking to a schedule. That they don't post because they don't feel like it, but to the agency, that's the nightmare, because we have a schedule. You're part of a larger picture, and just because you don't feel like it, we can't do that. And so you're working with a lot of young influencers who may not understand the critical nature of a schedule, and they may not be mature enough to handle everything that the demands of this contract of working. Now, also, some of the things you have to deal with is skepticism from the followers of the influencer. An example here is a very strong influencer who talks about that they always carried a carton of their favorite juice. And the top comment was that they were the biggest sellout ever. And so how their audience or how their followers respond is not always predictable. And if it doesn't fit their voice, if it doesn't fit their personality, and if it comes off as a blatant brand placement, boy, you're going to be in for trouble, because people don't always trust ads, and they don't always trust the influencer. And so there may be backlash based on how it was done, or even just a natural skepticism, but be prepared that it may not always go the way you want it to go. I know I'm presenting a lot of downsides here, but this is what you need to know in order to do this correctly. Next thing is be aware. Many influencers, they may have gained a certain amount of followers, but followers, like anything else, are a commodity. Here's an example of a company where you can buy followers. I can buy $2,500 followers for $29. I can buy 10,000 likes for less than $70. And this is all for Instagram. You can do this for any social media. You can go out and buy followers. There are click farms. There are all kinds of things, and I'm sure you've seen these in the news, of these just racks of phones, computers that are, their sole purpose is creating false followers and false likes, and that's anyone can go out and buy that for their own personal brand. Now, there are some companies that will audit an influencer before you pay with or approach them. But again, remember that this is kind of an arms race. The companies that do the audits of the influencers, they're trying to keep ahead of these companies that are trying to make money, and there is a market of bloggers, video bloggers, Instagram personalities that are always trying to inflate their numbers, because the larger their numbers, the more they can demand from a contract. And if you've done any amount of research into influencer marketing, one of the things that blew me away is, as I was looking and doing some more research on this, when I was looking for articles about influencer marketing, I found 3 different types of articles. There were articles from influencers talking about how effective influencer marketing was. There were articles from the media talking about how awesome working with influencers are, and then also from providers writing articles about how awesome working with influencers are. And here's an example from an article that ranked in the top 10 for influencer marketing. At the bottom of the article, if you have any questions, if you want professional guidance, launching your very own, of course, hyperlinked influencer marketing campaign, get in touch with me. There is a lot of media hype about influencer marketing, and most of what you will find in the search results are a result of influencers writing articles about working with influencers, providers, service providers writing about it, and the media who's absolutely in love with it because it kind of fits with them as well. Be prepared for what you will see. And this goes along with every new shiny thing when it comes to internet marketing. You're going to have those who immediately benefit from it writing articles about it. You're going to have those who sell the services writing articles about it, and they know how to get those articles in the top results. So be sure what you read, learn from it, but also deal with it with a healthy amount of skepticism. Here's the bottom line, and I'm going to give it to you from all the research that I've done and also from campaigns that I've worked on. If you're going to use an influencer, number one, it doesn't matter whether it's a micro or macro influencer, you find the one that works best with you. Typically, it's an influencer who already likes your brand, who already does something that's related to your brand. And if they have an affinity for your brand, they're going to care about how it's presented, and they're going to be much more personally invested. In fact, if you work with an influencer who already has an affinity to your brand, they may lower their price just to work with you. That's what a lot of some of the experience that I've seen, and then also those that have worked with influencers, is finding those that, you know what, they fit perfectly, and there's a great relationship. They want to see the brand succeed, you want to see it, and so it matches. Because of that, they have the right audience. They have the audience that's going to be receptive to their paid sponsorship or paid ad, because that legally has to be disclosed. You want to make sure that audience is right in line, knowing that as it's disclosed, that this is a paid advertisement and that they are getting paid in order to talk about this. You want to make sure you've got an audience that's going to listen and not revolt, and that they will accept that message. And finally, it's a perfect mix when you've got the right personality, the right audience, that we then have a partnership on keeping the brand, but also allowing a certain amount of creative flexibility for that influencer personality to tell their own story. That's at the bottom line. And hey, right now, we've got time for questions. So I look forward to hearing your questions about a lot of information here.
Great, that's wonderful, Matt. That was an amazing wrap-up on a really a new topic for a lot of people. I know that social selling is a big issue that is, or a big topic that is really important for marketers and salespeople alike, and so we get a lot of questions about that. And we actually have quite a few questions bubbling up, and on that topic of social selling, Carl asked that if you're having difficulty, social selling is a new sales technique where you basically, as a salesperson or as a marketer, you don't use emails or phone calls, that sort of thing. You try to chum up through influencers or even prospects via social media in a very soft, soft sell, long-term relationship building process. And that goes a long way to building relationships with influencers. But Carl asks if you're having difficulty with your charming skills at social selling with an influencer, how can you approach an influencer who may not already be advertised as a paid or accepting funds type of influencer? How can you approach a trusted influencer and say, hey, we have some marketing dollars. I was wondering if there's anything you'd be willing to do for us. What's a good way to approach a reluctant or a new influencer who doesn't actually have a paid presence already?
Boy, that's its own webinar right there. Just on the approach itself is so critical because there's a lot of ways to screw it up. So I'll tell you, I get pitches, and what amazes me about the pitch is when in the pitch that they make to me, it's more about them and what they want and their offer rather than how it benefits me and my audience. Any influencer, blogger, they got where they are because of their audience and giving information that their audience wants. If you approach them and saying, hey, we want you to do this because we're this, or you've lost them. So the first thing that's vitally important in making that pitch is finding out, okay, do we have a compatible product that will fit their message? Do we have a compatible business that will fit their message? And how will they benefit? Not just financially, but how will they benefit? How will their audience benefit from us advertising in some way? How does it help this influencer build value or build more trust or build more relationship with their audience? Because that's ultimately what they want. It's their audience that's got them where they are.
Yeah, that's great. That's excellent advice. So Lorraine has a question. Do you have any advice on how to go about ensuring the influencer is doing their part? For example, if they're supposed to be promoting on their own networks, how can you be sure that they're holding up their end of the bargain?
Well, short of just having someone keep an eye on it, there are some third-party services, but that's one of those things that, you've got to have trust in a relationship. The number one thing I would do is just, have them kind of report to me that, okay, when you've done these things, let us know. Chances are, depending upon what you're doing, you are checking and reviewing what they do before they post it, especially if it's a video or an ad or a post. If it's not written into your contract, to review all communications before they go out, to be sure it fits the brand message, to be for sure it fits your personality as well as their personality. So in that way, you'll know what's going out, who approved it. There is a schedule and obviously when they do it, you should be able to see it and know that it was completed. A lot of this is worked out in the contract and agreement.
Wonderful, great. Now here's a question from Armando. Is there ever a scenario where an ongoing paid campaign is warranted? For example, social media campaigns tend to be only days or weeks long. Is there an exception to that rule?
Some are. Yeah, I'm trying to think here. What really, when I get into more of the long-term type social campaigns, then it's mainly what I'm looking at is from a mainly programmatic standpoint, where I'm using it in conjunction with, okay, so let's say I did a paid search campaign and people went to my landing page and they clicked on a few things. They will then drop into my programmatic campaign, which will target them on social networks. And only people that have seen that landing page and have not yet converted or become a lead, they will be the only ones that see that ad. Those types of campaigns I run for a longer period of time because they are lead capture campaigns or lead recapture, kind of like a retargeting campaign to get those people back in. That's the only type of thing that I would describe as more of a long-term. Whereas, yes, most of social is a very short term. For example, I remember seeing something about Facebook ads that they are seeing the most amount within like 3 days. A Facebook ad is typically seen about 50 times. And so after 2 days, your message is already old if you're on Facebook. And so the speed at which you have to keep up with your campaigns, because there's nothing worse than an old ad that you have seen 100 times in a week. You're no longer really paying attention to it other than there's that ad again.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've heard it said numerous times that the first question people ask themselves when they see an ad is, have I seen this before? And the more times you get that, it's like having CNN News on for all day long. Yep. You keep seeing it over and over again. Okay, we just have one last question from Daphne. And Daphne asks, do you have any more negotiating tips that you could use with paid placement when you're talking to publishers? For example, things such as bundling.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the ways, now, wait a second. Is this from an influencer standpoint?
This is from, well, it could be either, but this is clearly from an advertiser's standpoint.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, I would be looking at, so one of those was a cost for developing a video for each of the 3 major networks. So what they're doing is not just recycling the same video across 3 different platforms. They're creating a video for each platform, because this gets back to the media as the message. People are going to watch a Facebook video much differently than people on Snapchat would or Instagram would view a video. You can see that in the metrics, and so it's got to be a different format. It's got to be faster. It's got to be, made a little differently. So simply, making sure that they are adapting the message to the medium that they're using, and then also that it's adapted to the campaign. And we are driving people to a specific, maybe it's a shared landing page or something like that. But other than that, I would audit every influencer with one of these audit sites for their followers, because it's a lot of your mid-level and micro influencers. They're the ones that tend to pad their numbers because they want the big numbers, and they want the macro numbers. However, I've seen some macros even paying for additional likes and followers. So always use one of those audits and kind of get a sense of the percentage of bots that are following them. They may know about it. They may be paying for it. You never know. But then also, what's the schedule? How many posts? What are they going to do? How are they going to react if their audience doesn't like it? It's really kind of angling to answer as many questions as you can before you have that agreement.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially, even writing in that contract thing about what happens if they get some backlash, what are they going to do? So that's really interesting. Well, great. thank you very much, Matt. This was an amazing webinar, and we're getting a lot of great feedback already from
Thank you, Dan.
Got a lot of good stuff out of it. So everyone who's listening, you will also be getting a recording of this webinar, so you can review it at a future date. Thanks again for joining us, and join us again next Thursday, actually next Wednesday, where we're going to be doing another direct marketing and digital marketing webinar on some secrets about pay-per-click advertising. So if there's anything else you'd like to say, feel free to email us and contact us at the webinar invite address. And I have been very happy to host you. I'm Dan Beaver, and I just want to say one more thanks to Matt Bailey.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon, evening, or morning. Bye-bye.